Everybody joining me this week on the podcast is Blake Lovell. Check him out over at the Southeastern 14 older place. One of the best guys out there to talk college basketball with, not just the SEC. This guy knows about everything about these big name players we're going to talk about, and we talked about. We also have a third member
Look at that.
there
Perfect timing.
on Blake's side of the microphone. We have a third member. I guess they're going to give their basketball input as well here in the podcast. But Blake, it's good to talk to you. I think it's the first time we've done a video with this. It's usually over the phone, but I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, first time my dog has made an appearance with us, I think. It's so funny because we spent like 5 minutes talking about this before we hit record. I was like, yeah, he's usually in here, but now he's not. And what do you know? It doesn't matter. He still likes to make his appearance. But no, I appreciate it, Phillip. Always enjoy catching up with you. And yeah, it seems like there's always something going on, especially in the SEC and all that. And yeah, as we know, draft coming up and all that good stuff. So lots happening.
And if everybody keeps seeing my hand flip up, I have my notepad right here in front of me. But as everybody knows, in the South, it is over 100 degrees everywhere. So
yeah, well, by the way, to point that out, and as I pointed out to you as well in part of our conversation, I happen to be in one of those rooms where the way my desk is situated, it is so hot outside that like the air vent like comes just straight on me, and it's one of those where like it's when you try to like push the air vent, you have to like do it with your thumb to get it. It doesn't budge. So like it's right here. And of course, everyone would say, why don't you just move your desk? I'm like, it's really the only spot I can put it in. So I'm like, every time, man, this air is blowing out. I feel like I'm in, Game of Thrones here. I'm like in the north somewhere. Like I'm with Jon Snow, man. It is just cold. So yeah, so I know it's 100 degrees in our part of the territory, but it's just cold in here. So
Yeah. I wish I had some of that cold. I told my apartment kind of having issues with the air conditioner right now. It is not ideal for this time of year, but that's why you have a box fan, and I will endure on that. It's interesting. Like I said, we do have the NBA draft coming up this Thursday, and it just seems like there's just a lot of conversation on who should be number one. It seemed like during the college basketball season, Chet Holmgren looked like the guy that everybody was talking about being number one. Now it looks like Jabari Smith could be number one. I know Paolo Banchero there at Duke, obviously a super talented player, he's worthy of that pick as well. Someone that's seen these guys play all throughout the college basketball season and leading up to this week, what's your just overall thoughts on the three and just the conversation going around about them?
Yeah, I mean, not surprising. I think we all knew we'd be in this position where we would talk about these three extensively, just compared to some of the other prospects. And of course, like you said, you can see a lot of different people, and everyone has a different opinion, I think, on which one would you take. I think to me, it's like always the question, right? It's what is the specific question in terms of who do I think goes number one? I think it's probably going to be Jabari Smith, which we've talked about Auburn before. I think watching him play last year, it was pretty clear just all the tools this guy has and all the big shots he could make and all the different things he could do. He's going to be one of those guys that plays probably a decade or more in the NBA just based on his skill set, and he'll fit right in with everyone just in terms of his ability to do a lot of different things. Again, whether that's the Magic, whether it's the Thunder, whether it's the Rockets, whoever you want to put in that position. Now, if you change the question, and this may not make some of my SEC brethren all that happy, but the guy I think probably has the best NBA career is probably Banchero. I think that, he's one that I think I would put in that spot to say, I just look at all the things too with him, right? And if we talk about what we kind of discussed the most during last college basketball season, he was kind of the guy that I think everyone knew, right? And we were talking about the magical run that Duke could have and Coach K's last season and all those things. And I mean, he was just, you could see it. Like he just had everything. I think he had like those intangibles. And that's not to say that, a Jabari Smith or a Chet Holmgren, that they do not have those. It's just, to me, he was that guy that I felt was just a step above everyone else. Even if that gap was pretty close, it's just, I don't know. I just love watching him play. And I think his game, all of these guys' game will translate to the NBA. I don't have any issues with any of these guys at the top. But for some reason, I think, which I've changed my mind on. I do this a lot, Phillip. I mean, it's just, I've changed my mind on those two a lot. But if you're asking me today, which you are, I think I'd probably lean Banchero in terms of the guy I think has the best career. The guy I think goes number one is probably Jabari Smith, because I just think he fits in better with the Magic. And I think there's a lot of different things they'll be able to do there with him. So I think that's probably, how it would go, and which, of course, leaves Holmgren, to me, probably right there in the middle, even though I think if you look at the way the board falls for most people, it's Smith 1, Holmgren 2, Banchero 3, if, it's kind of alternating that order, meaning, if it's Smith number 1, you think Holmgren goes 2, just in terms of fit when it comes to Oklahoma City and Houston and those things.
Yeah, too, and all three of these guys, they are, I think, all tailor made for the NBA game. Just their skill sets all match up. But it really is to me amazing. I just want to have this general conversation with you. Just the difference in the two games. I mean, the college game is more physical. Honestly, when I watch college basketball, it's probably the reason why I lean more towards college than pro. It reminds me more of the 90s and early 2000s NBA that I enjoyed.
That can be a good thing and bad thing sometimes, but yes, I agree. It is, yes.
Because one, I appreciate bigs that can be bigs, and the NBA game, which is why I think these three are very tailor made to the NBA game. But we watch it now. You got guys that are 6'8" playing center in the NBA now. It's just just kind of how the game has gone. What are the biggest differences think for any college player that transition when they go from college to the NBA?
Yeah, I mean it's always different. I think for everyone, just because I know we say we talk about football and all these different things just in terms of like fit and just how you kind of fit into who's around you. And I think that's always important in the NBA, especially because it's such a superstar dominated league. And I think that's such an important part of it to me. So, but knowing that these guys at the top, sure, they're going to go to teams that have, star players on it, but they're not going necessarily to the Celtics. They're not going to the Warriors and those kind of teams that just have maybe multiple, of those top tier superstars, of course, the Lakers and teams like that. So I think that's always an interesting aspect because that means what? That means the transition is going to be a little bit harder because you are going to be thrust into a role immediately. And I think that's especially when we're talking about those guys in that, lottery range. Like these are guys who are not expected to come in and sit on the bench for 25 minutes a game. These are guys who are going to be out there. And I think that can be the hardest part of the adjustment. It's just knowing that there really is there's not much of a buffer period when you're these top prospects, right? And like you said, there are some differences in the way that the college and pro game works. And when you have to just immediately be put into that, it can be. And I think the physicality is a big part of it to me. I think that is probably the biggest thing. Just, I don't even necessarily think it's the style or anything like that. I think it's just the physicality and the strength, the difference in that when you're making the jump from playing in college to going to the NBA and you're seeing guys like LeBron and all these other guys and just the physical specimens that you're dealing with. Sure, you saw some similarities in college, but you didn't see guys like that. You don't see some of these guys that are just, just rock solid, 5% body fat, like just completely, built like a rock. And again, yeah, sure, there are some guys like that in college, but it's just, I think that's the biggest difference. How do you adjust to that physicality? And I think, like you said, for big men, especially because that's where, when you're a big man, that's the name of the game. Like it's going to be physical in there. Whereas, sure, there's going to be physicality. If you're a guard, there's going to have guys bumping you a bit more. And can you handle that contact? But when you're a big man, it's all about that. I mean, yes, you have guys that are going to jump out and make shots from the outside. That's what you want in the NBA now. But you still got to rebound. You still got to play defense. And so I think that is such a big part of it to me. I think that is the hardest transition. And that's what's so interesting to me. And I know we talk about the draft as a whole, but for this top three specifically, right? You're talking about 2 6'10" guys and a 7-foot guy. And I mean, that is where the adjustment's going to happen. I mean, especially for Holmgren. I know everyone's talking about that, right? I mean, this is a guy that he's not built like some of these other guys. And so I think that makes it a lot more interesting. And I think that's why, too, you have some people that are saying, okay, he'll probably be taken in the top 3. I'd be surprised if he's not. Some people are like, well, maybe he drops to 5 or something like that. I don't see that happening. But I mean, you can understand maybe some of the things that people could find some concern with. And I think it probably goes back to things like that. To me, just knowing the different level when it comes to physicality.
You know what? I'll start there. You just mentioned him, Chet Holmgren. His game and average, about 14 points per game. I mean, he's about 10 rebounds a game. Great shot blocker. I mean, he's long. He's got a long wingspan, but I think that helps him out a lot with his defense. But maybe just me, but sometimes I'll watch him play, especially sometimes in the tournament. Yes, he's a good shot blocker, but it did seem like sometimes if somebody got into him, he would backpedal. like he would
Yeah.
lose his stance a little bit. Offensively, he can hit the threes. He's a good ball handler. I mean, I saw so many times this year he got the ball and rebound. He took it himself,
Yeah.
coast to coast. Oh, but the concerns with his the body type. He's lanky. He's 7 foot, but he's under 200 pounds. How much does some of that stuff concern you about on that end of things with him?
Yeah, and I think too that's the difference between college and pros and this is not to knock on any college guy who runs a workout program for a college team, because trust me, some of these guys are doing pro type workouts and they're building guys again into pro bodies, but you're also going to be doing this every day. Like this is your career now, right? It's not like
Mhm.
college where, it's much different in terms of your setup and your schedule and all those things. So I don't think NBA teams necessarily worry about that because they're like, there's confidence there. Every team is like, we got our guy and he'll get this guy bigger. Like we promise we'll get bigger. He'll get stronger. We understand the body type. But like you said, that is something too you're going to think about no matter what. Because if you're physically trying to compare, again, let's say you're a team in a certain division and you're looking around saying, all right, we're going to play these teams however many times a year. And I look on the other side and I see, someone like LeBron and, all these other guys, these big guys around the league that are just, again, just physical specimens. Well, I mean, what's my game plan then? When I look at a guy like this that I'm going to bring in as a rookie or even a year in, right? Because I mean, it's not like I don't think someone like Holmgren's just going to immediately go from whatever, getting 50 pounds in the offside. I don't think so. I would think it'd probably take a little bit longer for process. If he does, then he is just, they're doing something right. But,
Or wrong.
right, it's true or wrong, or it just may be the wrong way. So, but no, I mean, that again, too, we always say the same thing. You can't teach size. And I think when
Yeah.
you have a 7-foot guy, like you said, can block shots, he has the links, just the wingspan, his offensive game is what is so appealing, right? And again, it is the shot blocking too, but you look at the offensive game and you're a coach sitting there saying, I can work with that. Like that is absolutely something that will translate to the NBA level. He'll be able to score points. But these are the tiny things that we talk about where if we are comparing, which we will, I mean, we're going to compare. If these are the top 3 picks, we will compare them 5 years from now, 3 years from now, whatever. These are the things I think you look at and say, all right, if I compare him to Jabari Smith and Paolo Banchero, it's like, right now, who am I going to take of that group? And again, I made my points as to who I think would probably in what order, but that doesn't mean that a guy like Holmgren can't get there. It's just from the starting point, I think you can probably look at these 3 and feel like that maybe he has the most area of improvement, but that could also be a good thing where it's like he maybe does have more potential perhaps than the others when you really think about it based on how he plays and based on kind of the evolution of the style that we see now in the NBA. So
Yeah, and I was watching some highlights of him too. He's really good on the when he gets the ball handed off. Like as soon as
yeah,
he's good at getting the shot up, especially off, any pick and roll action, stuff like that. So he's very impressive. He's got the 1 foot fade away on the jumper, which you're going to get anybody that does that now. Dirk Nowitzki is going to be the comparison. It's just where
yep.
that goes. I think all 3, well, especially in Jabari Smith too. I was going to get into him too next, and of course, all we're both South, SEC country down here, and just looking at him. Obviously, I think you talked about him having a long career. His ability to make jump shots, and the fact is that his dad was in the NBA is going to help him. I think just
Yeah.
from an advice standpoint, what to expect when he gets to the league. But I will say, I kind of a complaint or criticism I had about Jabari Smith during the season, and I know a lot of those too is the Bruce Pearl style. Everybody gets involved. It's team oriented game, obviously. But sometimes I felt like in big moments he was not featured a lot, or maybe he didn't force his game on there. And then you saw in the tournament, the last game, 3 of 16 shooting. So he had some issues there, but he high points the ball. I mean, I could talk so many good things I know about Jabari. What did you see one of his progression as the season went on, where you saw improvement to maybe lead to him being a number 1 player?
Yeah, I know this is like this is not a very specific response, but like, and I don't know if this will make sense, I guess, to some people, but it's I started to see him hit more NBA shots, if that makes sense. Like I saw him start to hit more of those, the ones with the back to the basket where he can turn around and just make shots over people. We know too, like that's a big part of the NBA.
Yeah.
You have to be able to do that, especially at that size. Like you have to be able to just turn around, make shots over people. And I think that was something you started to see the evolution of. And like you said, you could certainly point out, well, look at some of the other options he had. And I would also argue too, Phillip, that there were probably some times where he didn't take some shots, but it wasn't his fault. I
No,
would say that there were some other people that probably, were not too shy about taking shots on that Auburn team. And
I
again,
think,
I'm not going to knock those guys because that's the system, right? Like we've talked about
yeah,
that before with Bruce Pearl. I say every time, I'm like, if I had a guard and I was going to send him somewhere in the country, I'd probably send him to Bruce Pearl because I know he's going to get some shots because that's just how they play. Like they have the freedom, but I think that did at times come at the expense of Jabari Smith, and we kind of saw in some of the games they
mhm,
struggled. That was a reason why, and so I think it goes both ways. I think on that in terms of just when you look at some of the things he could do, and I think him making some of those shots. I mean, his jump shot is as beautiful as it gets. Like it's
it
just one of
is.
those things where it's almost perfect. And I think that's something where when he has the size that he has, knowing now he can turn around, make shots, he can shoot over people, and just the length, everything is there for him. And I think being able to knock down shots from outside, that's why, like I said, I mean, even if I make the point that as of right now, I think Banchero may have the better career. I don't know. I think that gap's pretty small, though. I still think Jabari Smith's probably the guy you're taking number one overall. When you really think about it, just based on the fit, if I'm Orlando, because I look at all those things and I see everything that he can do. Now, look, he's the same way too. He's going to have to get stronger. Like there's,
Yeah,
it's the same situation. Like it's not, exact same, but like he has to get stronger. I don't necessarily think he was someone. Look, he's a great defensive player, but he didn't really have to be used. And it goes back to what I said. Like he's going to have to be someone that I think rebounds. He's going to have to be a rebounder in the NBA. Like he's going to have to get in there and get physical, and that I think comes with the added strength and those kind of things. So I mean, there's with all these guys, there's room to improve. But I think when you just look at the polish, maybe that's the best word. I think he's such a polished player that really, to me, the aspects he can get better at, and he will get better at, are more physical than actual part of the game. Like I think his game is pretty much already there for a lot of things he's going to need to be successful in the NBA. I think it's just the physical aspect, and making that adjustment I think will be the biggest thing for him too.
All three of these guys, and we're about to get in Banchero in a few minutes though. But I look at this too of these guys defensively, and I've seen a lot of maybe some criticism, all of them on the defense side of the ball. When have they had to play defense? Because these are one and done guys. So in high school that they were not looked upon. Okay, we need you to be the defensive stopper. More than likely, their coaches told no, just go score. And then in college, kind of same thing. And with Jabari Smith, it kind of helps when you have Walker Kessler sitting there behind you, protecting the rim. So there's some things you didn't have to do because he's sitting there behind you. So I think that's one of them with these guys too. When you look at all three of them on defense side of the ball, because really defense is about effort. And if all three of these guys, we know they give effort. So they should, I think, when they get to the pro, they're all going to be fine there because we know they're effort players. It's just really their careers playing basketball. They haven't really been asked to be great defensive players.
And look, we know anyways, nobody plays defense in the NBA, right? So I'm just kidding everyone. That's the joke, everyone still makes. But trust me, when you watch the NBA, I promise you, guys play defense. Yes, does it get a little more intense in the playoffs? Sure it does. But I've always hated that. I'm like, they play defense. It's just, by the way, there's some great offensive players too that make it look like some teams don't play defense. I mean, I think with Jabari Smith, it is just going to be something where I look at him and, like you said, if I'm him, I'm trying to find a package deal somewhere just to give me Walker Kessler. Just see if we can put us together somehow, because that take a lot off of Jabari Smith because they worked very well together. But like I said, I mean, he'll have opportunities to do the same, pairing off with someone else. That will ease that pressure a little bit, I think, right away for him. So.
Oh, when you were talking about guards at Auburn shooting a little bit too much, you may not want to say a name, but I will. Were you referring to Wendell Green?
I mean, look, I think you can go for, quite honestly, and I'm being honest here. Like, I think this can go for any guard in Auburn's system. Like, I really believe that. You could go back to years before, right? I mean, I've said it. Go back to like Jared Harper, Bryce Brown years. Like, Jared Harper would take some shots that you would, look up and be like, what on earth was that? But at the end of the day, you also looked up and said, well, what is, some of the main reasons why we won certain games was because of him. And so I
Hmm.
think that it's the same thing with Green and some of these other guys. Like if they're not on the floor, they're probably not winning. And so it's a mixed bag sometimes, but I think that just comes with the territory. And that's why, like I said, I've always been of the opinion that if you're a guard and you want to play in one of the more entertaining, places to play, it's funny now that I'd say probably like 2 of the top 10 easily for me would be Alabama and Auburn because of how Nate Oates plays and how Bruce Pearl plays, which again, that's crazy to think that we're having that conversation about offense with those 2 teams specifically when you go back, probably 6, 7 years ago. And if you had to watch those 2 teams play offense, I'm sorry, because it's just, it was not to the level that it is now. So it's, yeah, so I'll say that I don't want to knock anybody, but I will say that if you love offensive freedom, that is a great place to get it, I think. So,
Yeah, I remember a game between the two, probably 5, 6 years ago. I don't think either one of them scored 50. So,
yeah, so there you go.
and now there's times where Alabama may shoot 53s in a game or 40 to 50.
That's right. Yeah.
Didn't they do that? I think they did that like 2 or 3 seasons ago. It was like the 40 range on number of threes they put up or in a game.
Listen, if you're going to get beat, you'd much rather get beat 98 to 96 versus 50 to 48. So
Yeah.
that's my thing too. Is I'm fine with going 2-27 if I'm a coach. If my team loses 115 to 108 versus 38 to 28, it's just so that's what we love. We love offense, and Auburn loves offense. Alabama loves offense. A lot of good offensive players. So.
Well, I think defense is easier to fix than offense because you can't shoot, you can't shoot. But you can,
that's
like
true.
I said, you can teach effort. You can get guys can give a better effort. You can get that out of them. But you're right. Alabama, Auburn, it's different. Whoever thought this state would also be a basketball state, which I know the way Auburn football team's going. They're a basketball school over there now, anyways. But that's a topic for another day.
There you go. I'm gonna get you. Somebody else gonna have to come in on that one. I don't want to be in that mess. Although we're still gonna talk about it at some point. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I said enough on that topic, anyways. So we get the Paolo Banchero. What he is, I tell you what was impressive me, not stats, during the tournament against Michigan State and Texas Tech. At the end of the games, when they needed him to show up, they needed somebody to step up and make big shots. It seemed like it was always him. I mean, it wasn't just him, but there were other guys on Duke play, but it really seemed like he was a big factor in that. I think that's one thing NBA scouts gotta love. This is a guy that doesn't shy away from the big moment. He wanted the ball at any of his games. You talked about him. You said he would be your number one guy. What other things about his game really stood you? He kind of reminds me of a Blake Griffin, but with a better jump shot.
Yeah, I mean, I know we always use this word, and people want to be like, well, what specifically you mean? Like, I think intangibles is a big part of it. Like, it really is. Like, it's those NBA ready things that I think you just, for some reason, you look at him and I'm like, he has it. And again, it's hard to define, but I think he just has a lot of those things that I look ahead again, 10 years, let's say 10 years in the future. I see this guy with the way he plays and those kind of things. I just think that he has everything you need. And again, that's not to say, like I said, I think Jabari Smith does too. And that gap is very small between the two, but there's just something about watching him play last year, which again, that's the interesting thing, right? Is you only have such a small sample size with these guys. And I think that's what too, it's, you get 38 games or something to really sink your teeth into these guys and say, all right, I feel great about it, but it's like, I'd like to maybe give me 50 games and I'll feel a little bit better about, everything. But with him, I just think it's all there. Again, I think this is where he has more strength. I feel like he's, certainly you look at the build of a guy like this. What is he, 250, something like that? And I mean, you're talking about somebody that really has the physical tools, I think, to implement, his will in the NBA and just really be able to kind of put the type of game that he needs. There are areas of improvement, I think, across the board too with him. There are some things that he can get better at. There's no doubt about it. But I also look at it and I'm just thinking, man, he's got all those kind of it type things that you really think you need to succeed in the NBA. And that's where I say this too. Sometimes I don't think we which we don't, because it's like once we get past the draft, we're too focused on looking ahead. But fit is everything, right? And
Yeah.
so you could, I think that's it. And like, that's why to me, this is such an interesting aspect is like, whatever order these three go in, is it going to be the right fit for these guys? We know they're going to go on a team that hasn't had a ton of success, but it's like, can they fit into what they want to do? And so when I look at him and I look at all three of these possibilities, which, like I said, I think Jabari Smith's probably going number one. So then if you put Banchero, let's say in Houston with the Rockets or something like that, there's just a lot of his offensive aspects that I just love. And I think there's just so many different things. The leadership, I think, is a big part of it. Again, as a freshman, right? Like, this is a young guy. And I know a lot of people pointed that out. Look at how he kind of, you talked about watching Duke and going back and watching those games and then how they kind of went throughout the tournament. He was just like, hey, he kind of was the leader of that team, even as a freshman. He's someone who was really, he was right there in the middle of everything. And I think that's what you want to see. And I just, we're splitting hairs when I think it comes to some of these guys, but I just think there are so many different things with him. And you talked about, I mean, he is kind of someone that feels like at times like a throwback type guy that with some of the good things he has in his game, like there are just a lot of those things that versatility, again, I think that's an overused word sometimes, but to me, he can do like, there's so many things he can do well. And I think for a big guy like that, knowing that he's already got the body you need, I think to have success right away, maybe that puts him a little ahead of some of these other guys.
Yeah, because he's the kind of guy, he'll go in the post. He'll get
Right.
with the physicality. He'll bang, which, Jabari Smith has the, post turnaround, but you don't see him a lot banging down low with other guys of his size. Of course, Chet Holmgren, you don't really see that at him either. But also what Banchero can do, he's got the 3-point game. He can step it out or he can go inside. So it's offensively, his game is unlimited.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I think there's, again, other people have kind of just called him sort of, he is the complete package, you feel like, on offense. Like, you feel like he's got kind of everything you need. And if you're an NBA team, right? I mean, what are you going to look at and say, oh, well, I'm not appealed by that? Sure you are. Like, it's very appealing, I think, to kind of see what he can do. And I just, like I said, I don't expect him to go number one, but I think that there are just a lot of things I look at with him. And if we look up whether it is 3, 5, 10 years, and we look up and say, well, he's an all-star, every year, would I be shocked? No. I just think that there's a lot of things that he can bring to the table. And I do think that, for him maybe landing in a Houston with the Rockets, I don't know. I feel like he would be put in a position to really shine right away. And maybe that's the fit there. And maybe it works out for both parties because I just think that he's got everything. So
yeah, definitely. It's going to be interesting. We feel like we know these three guys. Any draft, NFL, NBA, there's always, you never know when something wild may happen. Somebody may trade up. I know Oklahoma City has 2 picks in the top 15. So, that's always a possibility with what they could do there too as well. And lastly, before we go, just looking at the rest of the draft, SEC players or any players nationally you could think of. Is there someone you're really interested to see where they go that maybe could be a steal for an NBA team?
There's a guy in the SEC we talked about a lot last year, and it was interesting because he wasn't on the court a ton because he had fouling issues, and it was also a product of the style. I think at LSU, they're a very we know how Will Wade played there defensively, how he wanted them to play, but to me, like Tari Eason is someone where I think Chris and I have talked about this when we would do our videos, but like if you actually like translate the numbers, if he had been on the floor, as much as some of the other guys, like he'd have hands down probably been the SEC player of the year. Like he was that good. And Oscar Tshiebwe had a ridiculous season, but like he was still probably one of the top 4 or 5 players in the league, in my opinion, Tari Eason, even though he didn't play a ton. I know you could point out and say, well, it was his fault. He went on the floor, right? He just got into foul trouble. Sure, part of that is without question, but I think if you talk about just how a guy's game translates to the NBA, to me, that was one where you could see some people say, oh, well, Tari Eason's overrated because he's not on the floor enough. He fouls too much and this and that. But I look at it and I'm like, you've seen it, Phillip, how SEC basketball games are called sometimes. It's touch my microphone here and I'm out for, half a game because it's just like, that's too physical. So I think that's something where with him, to me, he's another one. I mean, you look at kind of his, what is he? He's 6'8". I'm looking up. Yeah, he's 6'8". He can play multiple positions. We know he can defend. I mean, again, you talk about just a guy that can go out and just play defense, and we've seen that. I mean, that I think you have to remember too. We talk about all these guys offensively. In the NBA, you can carve out a 15-year career just by
Mm-hmm.
going out and playing defense, right? Like that's
Yep.
all you got to do. And you know, you're a guy that is hard to take off the floor, but I think he's someone probably goes in that 15 to 20 range. That I think he's just got so many things that he can bring to the table. And like I said, I don't think we saw the best of him at LSU, even though we saw a lot of good things. But defensively, I think he can be someone again that looking up a decade from now saying he is a guy who just played so many minutes if he stayed out of foul trouble, which I think those are things you'll learn as you go throughout the NBA. You know, he's also pretty good size, pretty good strength for a guy like that. So and he can score, right? Like he's also a good offensive player. So I think he's kind of one of those guys that it just feels like he's going to be a regular in the NBA, if that makes sense. Like you feel like he's just going to be a regular starter with someone, and he's going to be somebody that's hard to take off the floor defensively, you know, just because he's everything he's going to bring to the table. So I think he's one that definitely you can look at. I mean, you know, TyTy Washington's interesting from Kentucky. He's someone else. How good could he have been last year if not for the injuries, right? Like that was
Mm-hmm.
something where we saw a lot of great things from him, but we also did not see the best of him last year because he was injured at times. And, you know, I mean, think about that really. I mean, we went into the season thinking a lot of people thought he'd be the SEC player of the year. And, you know, it's one of those things where it's not like we didn't see that potential. But another guy with just a very smooth shot. We know what he can do offensively. So I'm very interested to see where he goes. I mean, Kennedy Chandler, my goodness, goes without saying. You talk about having a leader at that age and that position. Everybody's looking for a leader. We know at the point guard position, and for him to be able to do what he did at Tennessee, I think he's just as fascinating as anybody because of the ball handling, everything he brings to the table. So I'm very interested to see kind of where he winds up. And then I guess we did mention him earlier. It is worth talking about Walker Kessler probably because, I mean, look, it's another guy that you cannot teach 7'1", 250. And we talk about defense. He's someone else that if you're in those positions, how are you going to take this guy off the floor if, you know, it's a 2-point game, right? And somebody's coming in, barreling in to try to get a game-tying shot. You're probably going to need Walker Kessler on the floor because you know he's got a potential to block that shot. And we saw just a prolific shot blocker. So I'm very curious to see kind of how he adapts. You know, he won't go as high as some of these other guys, but he'll be a first-round pick. I'm just curious to see what the fit's like there because, again, that can be your advantage too, right? It's like maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're not a top 15 pick. Maybe you're in the mid 20s, the late 20s. Well, guess what? That's good because that means you're going to a good team.
Yes.
Because, you know, and maybe he does find a fit where it's like maybe he's on one of those teams that all they need is just kind of that big man a year or two from now that can step in and really just give them, you know, 25, 30 minutes a game and really just be someone like Walker Kessler defensively. So I'm curious about that too. He's another one that's going to be interesting. And, you know, I think that just all these SEC guys that are projected to go in the first round, I think all of them have a lot of potential. But, you know, like we said, Jabari Smith's the clear number one, but I think Tari Eason might be the most underrated of the bunch there.
You know, you talked about Walker Kessler too, and if he could improve on this just a little bit, he becomes even dangerous as an NBA player because he showed at Auburn the capability to hit a three.
Oh, yeah.
If he can get a little bit better at that, he becomes even more of a value, an asset, because then it's like, okay, there's this big guy, but he can step out and hit threes. And obviously, we're the NBA game. It's like it's either a three or a layup or a foul shot. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty much the NBA game.
Well,
And
yeah.
and great finisher at the basket too. You get a lob to him, he's gonna finish it.
Well, and I think too, when he came into Auburn, we expect him to be a better shooter than he was because we knew he could make the shots from there. And last year, just kind of hit or miss, right? It just wasn't
Mm-hmm.
maybe as consistent as we thought it would be. But no, that's a good point. I mean, if he can do that in the NBA, look, you're again, that's another reason they can't take you off the floor. I think it's something else too. We didn't talk about earlier. We talked about the physicality, but let's be honest too. The speed is also a big difference
Yeah.
between college and the NBA. And I think that's something that some of these guys will, especially like a Walker Kessler, we know that's going to be an adjustment. And how does he adjust? That's going to determine the path of his career. Can he adjust to some of these guards, you know, that are just sure there's a lot of quick guards in college, but in the NBA, you know, again, we talk about just the physical aspect of it. That's something else too, where, you know, you got to move your feet in the NBA or there's too much quickness to where you can
Mm-hmm.
get foul trouble very quickly. And so I think that is something to probably look at with Walker Kessler. And some of these other guys too, like I said, like a Tari Eason, right? It's if you're getting in foul trouble in college, the speed's only going to pick up, the physicality is only going to pick up. So can you avoid that? And I think those are things you certainly have to look at as well for guys like that.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting on Thursday night. We're going to see where these guys are going to land with the draft. See who is number one. Will be Jabari Smith. But this has been a lot of fun, Blake. I told you I was going to keep you 20 minutes. We've gone 35 minutes here.
It's fine.
But it's been good basketball conversation here on the podcast. But listeners and viewers wanted to follow you online. Where can they find you, and where can they check out all the great work you're doing?
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Phillip. Like you said, Southeastern 14, that's all the stuff Chris and I have going on. If you've, followed all of Chris has got great baseball stuff going on right now in the College World Series / the SEC Invitational at times, it seems.
Yeah.
So Chris got a lot of great stuff up over there. And of course, all of our basketball videos, you can check those out from last season and a little bit in the off season, but we took a little bit of break there to kind of recharge and all that. But we'll have our football stuff coming and all that. So, yeah, you can follow all of our stuff there at southeastern14.com.
All right. Sounds good, Blake. Appreciate the time, and look forward to talking again sometime down the road.
I always enjoy